Hi friends, Justin Hibbard here. Can I ask a huge favor? If you're blessed by this podcast, if you've learned something from it, if this has been helpful to you, would you do me a huge favor and buy me a cup of coffee? Okay, don't really buy me a cup of coffee, but pretend like every month you're taking me out for a cup of coffee. How do you do this? You become a patron. It's just $5 a month to become a patron. It's the cost of a cup of coffee. It's all I'm asking. If you could be so generous in doing that, it will go a long way in supporting me, this podcast, and some big plans I have for Why Catholic. All you need to do is go to whycatholic.substack.com/subscribe. Thank you for your help. God bless you. Around the time of Jesus' birth, a Jewish man named Judas the Galilean, or Judas of Gamala, began a revolt. The reason? The Roman Empire had just instituted a new tax. In fact, we read about it in the story of Jesus' birth. We're told that there was an empire-wide census for the purpose of taxation. In other words, Caesar Augustus taxed anyone who lived in the Roman Empire. Though this head tax was not very much money, nobody likes taxes, especially not Judas the Galilean, who encouraged his fellow Jewish citizens not to register with the Roman government. In fact, he and his followers would burn down the houses and steal the cattle of those who did register. Some even considered Judas the long-awaited Messiah, a political leader who would one day liberate Israel from Roman occupation. However, after a short time, he and his followers were crushed, and the revolt was extinguished. Although Judas was dead, his movement and zeal lived on in what is considered the fourth sect of Judaism, the Zealots, theocratic nationalists who preached that God alone was the ruler of Israel and urged that no taxes should be paid to Rome. And some 33 years later, people were still talking about that tax, this time with Jesus. Hi, this is Justin Hibbard, and you're listening to Why Catholic, my podcast about the what and why of Catholicism. Today I want to begin a short series, a series on Catholicism and politics. I want to do this for a few reasons. First, this is an election year in the United States, and as seems to be the trend, elections get more and more divisive. Secondly, as our society becomes a place of less virtue and our candidates follow suit, I think Christians often wrestle with how they should vote. And third, if our call is to do the bidding of the kingdom of heaven on earth, how do we translate that into the political realm? And those are some of the questions we're going to tackle in this short series. Let me preface this by saying that up until a couple of years ago, I was heavily into politics. I had a podcast called Politics in Plain English, which was meant to explain current events in politics in a way that dispelled much of the heated rhetoric and partisan myths about a situation. In the past, I've done quite a bit of writing on the topic of politics, especially with respect to the Christian faith, and up until recently, I served as an elected councilman of my town. I even was a ghostwriter for a previous presidential candidate. All that to say, while I've since distanced myself from the political, there's a part of me that is still very much drawn to this topic. My goal in these episodes is not to tell you who to vote for. In fact, I'll be transparent in saying that I'm about as independent and nonpartisan as they come. I don't vote down party lines, and I don't buy into the mantra that voting for a candidate from outside the two major parties is a wasted vote, although I'll also vote for good candidates within the major parties. I want to be upfront in saying that because my goal here is neither to lean right or left as a particular society defines those terms, but to allow Jesus to be our compass with respect to politics. For these episodes, I plan to tell a lot of stories that will serve as object lessons, and for this first episode, I want to examine the politics of Jesus. Now, before you say he didn't really have a political position, I want to draw on a passage that you'll find in all three synoptic gospels, Matthew 22, Mark 12, and Luke 20. It's a conversation that Jesus had with members of the Pharisees and the Herodians. Allow me to begin with a little bit of context. There were four sects in Judaism. The Pharisees are probably the most recognizable name. These were the conservatives, the religious purists. They sought to foster a society that practiced the law. Juxtaposed with them were the Sadducees, sometimes also referred to as the Herodians. These were the liberals, both in terms of religion as well as government. They supported the foreign government, Herod, the appointed Roman leader, hence why they're called the Herodians. They were like, we like things like freely traveling the Roman Empire on the Roman system of roads. Maybe foreign occupation isn't so bad. They also only recognized the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, as inspired revelation, whereas the Pharisees believed that the entire Torah and the Talmud was inspired by God. Then you had two other more extreme groups. The first were the aforementioned zealots, people that were eager to actively resist the Roman occupation. And then there were the Essenes. They were people who felt that the best way to deal with the complication of a foreign governed society was to escape and live as hermits in small communities. From what we know, the Essenes lived in caves around the Dead Sea. In fact, we have them to thank for the Dead Sea Scrolls. Side note, if you think about Jesus' disciples, he had individuals like Matthew, a tax collector that worked for the Roman government, and Simon, a zealot, someone who likely wanted to overthrow the Roman government. So Jesus' inner circle was hardly a political monolith. He had people on all major sides. Boy, would I love to be a fly on the wall around the disciples' campfire at night. So let's get to the story. The Pharisees, the religious conservatives, and the Herodians, the liberals and government supporters, approached Jesus and asked him this, quote, "Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and care for no man, for you do not regard the position of men. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" End quote. And Jesus wasn't a fool. He knew they were up to some sort of trick. In fact, he calls them hypocrites. Why? Well, Jesus knew that if these two groups were working together, then they were likely not up to any good. In reality, this is a trap. Right before this conversation, Jesus entered triumphantly into Jerusalem with crowds heralding his arrival. You can imagine all the buzz. Is this the Messiah we've been waiting for? But where did Jesus go immediately afterwards? Did he go to the Roman rulers and tell them to get out or else? No, he went to the temple and flipped over the money-changing tables and opened the cages of the animals that were being sold there. He was exposing not the government extortion, but the temple extortion. He essentially embarrassed the religious leaders, the Pharisees, and they wanted revenge. On the other hand, the Herodians didn't want Jesus making a mess of things by making the Roman government angry. They liked the government. So they set a trap. If Jesus says, no, it's not lawful to pay the tax, then the Sadducees could go to the Romans and say, look, this man Jesus is nothing but a rebel rouser who intends to overthrow the Roman government by encouraging everyone to withhold taxes, just like Judas did a few decades before. However, if Jesus answers, yes, it is lawful, then the Pharisees could tell the people that Jesus is nothing but a sympathizer of the Roman government and foreign occupation, and certainly not the Messiah that they've been hoping for. But Jesus, who never let his arm be twisted into a yes or no answer, had an entirely different response. Here's how Mark explains it. Quote, "But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, 'Why are you putting me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me see it.' And they brought one. And he said to them, 'Whose head is this? And whose title?' They answered, 'The emperor's.' Jesus said to them, 'Give to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's.' And they were utterly amazed at him." End quote. Jesus' response may seem straightforward, but there are so many layers to it. First, I want to talk about Jesus' politics by the way he resists talking about politics. And for this, I want to rely on a sermon by the late Presbyterian minister, Dr. Tim Keller, an incredibly gifted scholar and teacher. Jesus resisted three things. He resisted political complacency, he resisted political simplicity, and he resisted political primacy. With respect to political complacency, Jesus doesn't say, hey, it doesn't matter. In fact, the best thing to do is not even engage with politics. Run to the hills and disassociate with society like the Essenes. He doesn't say that. He also resists political simplicity. They want him to answer one way or another. Are you a government supporter or a revolutionary? Are you for this party or that one? Jesus refuses to give in to their political simplicity. And third, we'll see how he refuses political primacy, and we'll focus on this point more in the next episode. Though in respect to this story, Jesus' answer is neither political resistance nor political servitude. We must not read this story too hastily, for there is no detail to be overlooked. First, let's stop and marvel at the fact that Jesus has to ask for a coin. He doesn't have a coin in his pocket. He is a king without a coin. And this seems to be a theme with Jesus. For example, in Matthew 17:24-27, Jesus instructed Peter to go fishing, and in the first fish he pulled out, he would find a coin that he should use to pay for Jesus and Peter's portion of the temple tax. We know that Jesus had money. John 12 tells us that Judas Iscariot cared for the money box in Jesus' ministry. So what do we make of these passages that demonstrate that Jesus never seems to have money when he needs to pay taxes? It's almost as if Jesus is subtly telling us that the way not to pay taxes is to not own anything that is taxable. When do we pay taxes? We pay taxes when we own land. We pay taxes when we buy things. We pay taxes when we make money. The more we own, the more taxes we're subject to. Now, I want to go back to Jesus' resistance of political complacency. I don't think this is Jesus giving us a mandate to proverbially run to the hills or give up our homes or to live homeless or to not participate in society. But I think it's a warning that if we want to play society's economic games, the more we'll be subject to society's economic rules. This is why many who take religious vows take a vow of poverty. It's not that owning things or making money is immoral, it's to detangle oneself from worldly obligations so that one can devote themselves to serving the church. When we decide to buy a house, we have to think about how to pay the mortgage. That dictates the type of money we need to make, which determines the job we work and the people we work for, and so forth. Many people acquire things to enhance their life only to discover that it enslaves them. It dictates so many decisions about their life. Another aspect of this story I want to focus on is the coin. The coin Jesus is given is a denarius. We know what these coins look like because we have them in museums around the world. It was a silver coin with the Emperor Tiberius' image on it, and around his image was the inscription Tiberius, son of the god Augustus, Pontificus Maximus, meaning high priest. Marvel with me at this ironic scene for just a moment. Here's Jesus, the King of the universe, the Son of the one true God, and the great high priest, holding up a coin with Tiberius' image, the Roman emperor, along with the claim that Tiberius is the Son of God and the high priest. So Jesus then asks a very simple question: whose image and inscription is on this coin? The two groups rightly respond by saying that the coin is Caesar's. After all, the coin was essentially blasphemous to the Jews. Tiberius Caesar and Caesar Augustus were humans. To the Jews, these men were certainly not gods, and to claim so would be contradicting the central tenet of Judaism, the Shema, which says, "The Lord our God is one." So these coins were most certainly Caesar's. They were inscribed with his theology, they were minted out of his treasury, and their value was established by his economic system. So Jesus responds by saying, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Now let's break that statement down. Jesus is telling them that the coin is Caesar's coin. Caesar's minted it, it's his image and inscription on it, and Caesar can give his coins and can demand them back. So what do they owe Caesar? They owe him the coin that is his. But here's the twist. That's all they owe him. When the group of people asks Jesus if they should pay the tax, they use the word didomi, which means to give. However, Jesus changes the verb. When he says render to Caesar, he uses the word apodidomi, meaning to pay a debt. In other words, Jesus is trying to change their whole perspective. They think the money is theirs, money that they're merely giving to Caesar in order to appease him. But whose money is it really? It's Caesar's. That coin has his face, his inscription. It's minted from his wealth. That money is only useful as long as the Roman government continues to exist. Anywhere outside of that empire, those coins are useless. That money that they earned through their labors ultimately centers around Caesar, not around them. So when Caesar gives you his money, it's ultimately not yours. It's his leash on you, so to speak. Now, Jesus juxtaposes this statement about rendering to Caesar what's Caesar's with rendering to God what's God's. What is God's? Everything is. Our entire being is his. We are made in his image. His image is written on our souls. So in a sense, Jesus is saying, look, Caesar wants his coin. Give him his stupid coin. But wink, wink, only give him his coin. In reality, Caesar wants more than a coin. He wants your allegiance, your devotion, your loyalty, and your worship. But you don't owe him that. That's not his. That is God's, and God's alone. Because your entire existence is God's. Your debt is your entire devotion to God. This is why the Bible tells us that God doesn't just love a giver. He loves a cheerful giver. Money in and of itself is meaningless to him. He doesn't just want your money. He wants your entire being. So when we put our entire selves into an act of charity, like giving of alms, we are rendering to God what is his. This is why Jesus' answer amazed them. They were looking to set a trap of political simplicity. Should you pay taxes or not pay taxes? Are you for the Pharisees' position or the Herodians? Are you a conservative or a liberal? Are you complicit in this foreign evil empire, or are you a revolutionary? And Jesus just refuses to play the game and play into their hands. He gives a simple, yet astoundingly profound answer that surpasses political simplicity. Politically speaking, the Pharisees and the Herodians are playing checkers, while Jesus is playing chess. Political simplicity is such a temptation, and Christians tend to give in to it, even though Jesus resisted it. How so? Well, consider when someone says, how could a Christian vote for that party? Or I'm a Christian, so of course I vote for this party. I can't speak for all the parties in all the countries, but in this country, no party has a consistent and logical system of ethics, let alone Christian ethics. You may choose a particular party based on one issue while simultaneously sacrificing another issue. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't vote for a candidate of a major party or not be registered for a party. I'm saying when you let your party influence your system of value and ethics, when you say this is what my party believes, so this is what I believe, you have become politically simplistic. When you say I do this because it's my constitutional right without any regard to your Christian identity or obligation, then you've become politically simplistic. For example, I personally am not registered with any party, and I do this because I know myself. I'm a pretty loyal person, so when I identify with a group, I want to dive all in. And I know how tempting it is for me to let my identity dictate my morals. However, I know others who choose to register for a party specifically because they want to influence that party towards a more consistent system of ethics. I think either of those positions demonstrates a healthy resistance to political simplicity. Jesus not only rejects political simplicity and political complacency, but he also rejects political primacy. And what do I mean by this? Political primacy is the approach that says what's most expedient, efficient, and most necessary in reforming society is by taking control of the political landscape. When Jesus enters triumphantly into Jerusalem, he doesn't go to the government's palace. He doesn't overthrow the government. He goes first to the temple and overthrows the tables of the money changers. That's a very revolutionary and political statement, but not the type of politics the Jewish people were expecting. You see, Jesus knew that there were deep-seated problems in his society. You can replace the government, but if those problems remain, you just have another government with the same problems. For example, we have a real immigration problem in my country. Our laws are convoluted, which only seems to encourage illegal immigration. Every party promises to do something, nobody does, and so our immigration problems continue, just bouncing back and forth under the control of different parties. Now, let me give you another example, abortion. Let me preface this by saying I'm extremely pro-life. I think abortion is an absolutely horrific injustice and stain on our society. I long for the day Roe v. Wade would be overturned in our country. However, I also knew that if it happened, we wouldn't just have a debate at the federal level, we would immediately have 50 debates at the state level. And that's exactly what happened. And at least in my state, the pro-life march attendance has diminished greatly in the aftermath of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I think many in the pro-life community were so fixated on taking control over the political landscape and changing the law that many neglected changing hearts. Now, with that said, implementing just laws are necessary, and oftentimes it results eventually in a society's mentality change, at least with future generations. We can see that with the issue of slavery. But when we think of Jesus' efforts, it was without a doubt most focused at the personal level. It was sitting down with the Samaritan woman at the well. It was being willing to have a conversation late at night with a Pharisee. It was going to a tax collector's house to have dinner. It was crossing the Sea of Galilee just to free a demon-possessed man. When Peter and John saw the paralyzed beggar outside the temple, they didn't say, we really need to lobby the government to build shelters for the homeless. No, they talked to him and they healed him. Again, this isn't to say that there isn't a place for politics or political influence or laws that make for a better society, but if you give a fraction of your time, money, energy, and effort working at the personal level, but the majority of it at the government or political level, then I think you're doing exactly what Jesus resisted, and you're giving into political primacy. There's an ironic truth about the kingdom of God. When its political influence is the smallest, where it is persecuted the greatest, it grows the fastest and the strongest. Where it has political influence or control of the government, it struggles, it loses its focus, it becomes complacent. I think God designed it that way. He designed it that way because the kingdom of God is far too great to be limited to borders and political offices. It supersedes the government because it can do something that the government can't. It can change hearts. You don't have to be an elected official to change the world. You just need to be willing to engage with people like Jesus did. Thank you for joining me for Why Catholic. Be sure to subscribe to Why Catholic wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also subscribe to my Substack site and get the next episode in your email inbox. As a subscriber, you get a special discount code to the Why Catholic Etsy store. If you've been blessed by this podcast and you're feeling generous, there's also a way to financially support it, and patrons get some extra perks. To become a free subscriber or a patron, just go to whycatholic.substack.com/subscribe. Also join me on Instagram at whycatholicpodcast, all one word. Thanks again for listening. My name is Justin Hibbard, and this is Why Catholic. God bless you.